Oh, whoops, I should hide this. Welcome back, Programming 11. We are going to be doing the second part of loading animated GIFs into processing and showing them. So the first step we have in the first video, and we just did here, was just getting the GIF into our sketch folder, which was quite a bit of work. And that process will be different for different GIFs. So, if you go to do it in a future GIF and it has gives you grief, like, don't hesitate to ask questions. So the next step now, part 2, is going to be us loading the files into processing. And it depends on your GIF. Like, you might have 4 pictures. I had a student last week with just two frames. It just went back and forth between like 2 things. So it could be very small, or it could be very large. You could have 100 or more frames. So we don't really want to do it in like manually sort of downloading or loading each picture. That would be very annoying. And we also don't want to have a variable for each different frame. That would be very frustrating. If you made a p-image variable for every little frame, we would never bother with animated GIFs. It would just be too frustrating. We'd just forget it. So we're going to use the array concept and the while loop concept for our animated GIFs as well. So if you haven't done those lessons yet, if you're still working on the beginning of the breakout project, then you should probably do that first, because we introduced the concept of arrays. But just to quickly summarize, it's basically like if you think of a regular variable, it's sort of like a piece of paper where you could write down one number or record one image. Then an array is like a book where you could record many numbers or many images, and each one is on a different page with a page number. And you can change the page number to flip from one page to the next, or from one number to the next, or from one picture to the next. So we're literally going to make like a flip book kind of animation by storing all the pictures into an array of pictures, and then showing it by kind of flipping from one page to the next in our draw function. So first step is to load those pictures. So I'm going to do a few things. I'm going to first of all make a p-image array. So again, if this is new to you, probably go check out those other lessons first. But you probably remember how to make a p-image. You can make a p-image that just stores one picture like this. But if you wanted to make an array or a book of images, which stores different pictures on different pages, then you put in the 2 square brackets like that. So that can nicely make an array of GIFs, or array of p-images technically. I'm going to call mine GIF, but if you have multiple GIFs, or you're planning on having different ones in your project, you don't have to. You can just have one. But if you want to, you might want to give it a better name than GIF, because that describes every GIF ever made, really. So that's good. That's a good start. I'm also going to make a variable to keep track of how many images are in my GIF, and you'll have to go count this yourself. So I'm going to make an int. An int. What's a good name for how many frames are in my GIF? Number of frames sounds a little bit long. I think last week we just used n, because we were lazy. But we might be using n for like number of bricks as well. So like there's only so many like 1-letter variables you can get away with. So technically, if you were to go to like Facebook or Google or something, they would have like specific rules for you and how you have to name your variables. And it would probably be a long name for the variable. You'd probably have to write in number of frames or something like very descriptive. It's really hard to like convince yourself though that that's worthwhile doing when you're the only person working on your project, because you can just remember the letter K was for frames or something like that. But it's probably good practice to to be more descriptive with your variable names, because eventually it'll be part of your job if you want to become a programmer in the industry. So I'm going to say number of frames, which is it's kind of hard to swallow that. So once we're done that, we're going to go and give those variables their initial values. So remember, a GIF an array has to be made before you can use it. This number of frames, you can just start using it. I can say number of frames equals, and I can just give it a number right off the bat. But for my array, I have to do that new keyword thing. So I have to say GIF equals new p-image array, and then I have to type the number of pages I want in my array in the square brackets. So that's unique to arrays, that you have to do that extra step to make it start working. For both of those variables, though, I do need to find out how many frames I have in my GIF. So I'm just going to jump over, and you should do this too, because your number will be probably different than my number. So I'm going to go to my data folder, just press Control K as in kangaroo to get in there, and I'm going to take a look. There's an easy way you can do this. You can see that they start counting at 0, and they end at whatever number they end at. So if this says 9, if I started counting at 0, I actually have 10 pictures here. Like that. Don't forget to count the 0th one. Another way, if you're just not confident on that, you can just select everything. I just press Control A, and at the bottom it says I have 10 items selected. So I'm like, oh, cool, 10. That's my answer. Of course, if you already have fonts and stuff in the data folder, like you can't just trust that number. But this is a brand new project, so I can just like select them and be like, oh, I got 10. Your number will be different, most likely. So feel free to change it to be whatever number is appropriate for your project. But I can go use 10. So I'm going to go back here, and I'm going to put in 10 here. And you could put 10 here as well. That would be fine. But there's a reason why we made that variable. This variable number of frames is going to be useful in many other places. So I would like to use it here as well. And I would just like to use that word number of frames anytime I want to refer to how many frames are there going to be. Just like in the breakout project, we have a variable for how many bricks they're going to be, and that variable shows up in a bunch of different places. So that way we can control all of those different places with one variable. So I'm going to do the same thing here. I'm going to put number of frames right there as well. And that way if we change this to a different GIF later on, I can just change it in this one place here, and all the places will change at the same time, which is very handy and avoids some errors. All right, so now we have an array of P images. It has as many pages as you need and no more and no less for loading your GIFs. So we can actually go and write a while loop now that will automate loading the GIF. Just to get a sense for the pattern, I'm going to copy and paste the code in. Actually, maybe before we do that, I'll just mention one quick problem you're going to have. For all of you, I accidentally dodged the problem, so I'll just go. Oops, sorry. I'll just go quickly give myself this problem. I'm going to make a 10th frame. So unfortunately, or maybe fortunately, I don't know, if you were to look at your code, if you have more than 10 images, do you see a weird numbering thing that's going to happen? So for the first several frames, it's always like 0, 0, 0, 1, 0, 2, 0, 3. But eventually, the leading 0 goes away. So once you get to the 10th frame, there's no longer a leading 0 there. It's just 10, 11, 12. So there's a couple ways to deal with that. We could make our code smarter to deal with it, so we could write better code. And I normally would be like, yes, let's do that. Let's make that happen. But because this lesson's already quite long and tricky, I'm going to suggest, and we can do the smart code later, but for now I'm going to suggest just go rename your first 10 and just chop off the leading 0, which sounds like a cheat, I know, and it is kind of a cheat. Because part of the course is like, hey, let's be lazy. Let's not do manual labor. So now I'm telling you to go do manual labor. But honestly, it takes like 20 seconds. So I think it's probably worthwhile to chop off the leading 0, the first ones. Later on, we can take a look at, like, hey, how would you have dealt with that with a piece of code? And it might be an interesting experience. But for now, just to make things simple, I'm just going to rename. You can click on a picture if you're on a PC and press F2, and it immediately goes to renaming it. I'm just going to chop off the leading 0 on the first 10. So I'll go do that, and I recommend you do that as well. If for some reason you don't have leading 0s, then great. You don't have to do it. If you have a GIF that is over 100 frames, then you have probably 2 leading 0s for under 10 and under, and then 1 leading 0 for 10 to 99, and then no leading 0s after that. So now you're going to be motivated to learn that smarter way to do it, the code way, because that's annoying to rename 100 files. So if that's your situation, maybe get something smaller for now, just to do the example. But I will show you later on how you could deal with it with code instead. Okay, so here we go. I'm going to delete my 10th one because I don't actually have a 10th one. So I've just renamed it. It didn't take long. So now I'm going to just copy and paste one of these file names into processing. So I'm just going to copy and paste the first one. And I'm going to jump into my code again. So here I am back in my setup. And I'll just show you how you could do it. If you were like, if you didn't want to be, if you wanted to be hardworking and you wanted to like do this the hard way and take a long time, then you could do this. You could say GIF page 0. Let's do load image this file. Whoops. So don't type this down because we're actually going to change this. But I just want to show you sort of the pattern of what would happen. And then I could do the next one by saying, well, on page 1, I'm going to load this file. Because it just changed, just one number really changes. On page 2, I'll load this file, and so on. You could like do this, and if I have 10 images, that's not too bad. Like you might be like, that's fine. I don't mind to do that. But there's a better way, and since we're learning about loops anyways, and we want to practice for tomorrow's quiz, for those of you who haven't done it yet. If you're at home, don't worry, you're not getting a new quiz. So check it out. We have this pattern where it's like page 0 loads frame _0 _ delay blah 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 blah, and then on page 1 we load frame 1 _ delay blah blah blah. Like there's a pattern here that we can turn a while loop to our advantage to sort of create that pattern over and over again, right? So what I can do is make a loop that counts from 0 to 1 less than the number of frames. So for me, it'll be 0 to 9. But whatever your number is, it'll be 0 to 1 less than that number, going up by 1 each time. And each time we'll plug that variable, that index variable, into our page number and into our file name. And we'll just sort of loop that over and over again. So let's do that loop right now. And this is a great practice for you. If I want to write a loop that counts from 0, because our page starts at 0, to whatever your number is, number of frames, but 1 less than that, and you want to go up by 1 each time, so it's like 0, 1, 2, 3, all the way to, well, for me, up to 9, but for you it'll be different. How would you write that while loop? I'll give you just a moment to think about that and put code on the page. I'd recommend actually try it out. Put some code on the page. It's okay if you're wrong. We're going to see the answer in a minute, but it would be great to give it a try. That way, when you see the answer, you'll be able to appreciate the answer more. Even if you get it wrong, you'll have learned more from trying than just sitting and watching. So give it a try. Try to write that while loop. You'll be doing it for your quiz coming up in a bit tomorrow. So might as well try it. No harm. I'll drink some coffee. You folks at home, some of you already wrote this quiz, so you're like sitting there like, get on with it. Actually, no, you probably just scrubbed ahead. Some of you who are just remote, by the way, we'll find a way to get those quizzes to you. I haven't quite figured that out yet, but don't worry, we will make it happen. We'll figure it out. I haven't quite figured out what the answer is, but the answer will be coming soon. Coffee. So as you write this while loop, you're probably trying to remember, oh yeah, how does it look again? It's very new to you. So that's great practice, right? Great to remind yourself about what that's going to look like. All right, folks, I think I'm going to go ahead and show you the answer now. So if you didn't quite finish it, don't feel bad. But now take a look and think about what was it that you had confusion about. Just reflect on that for a moment. Just be like, oh yeah, what did I need to see? What did I forget? What am I confused about? And if I don't explain your particular confusion, don't hesitate to raise your hand and ask. Or if you're at home, don't hesitate to ask on Teams. So here we go. I'm going to first start off with my index variable. And it's going to start at 0. So remember, the first line of code tells you where this pattern starts. Right? And so my page starts on page 0, so I want to start it at int I equals 0. If you made it a different variable, that's okay. It doesn't have to be I. But I is commonly used because they don't use I for much else in math. Like it's the complex number, but that doesn't happen too often in Breakout. We need imaginary numbers that don't exist on the number line. So that is the first part. I'm going to actually write the condition last. I like to do the condition last, because the next part is usually a slam dunk. It's like, how are we going up from one number to the next? And for this one, we're just going up by 1. So I'm just going to lock that in right now. I'm going to be I equals I plus 1. If you prefer, you could say I plus plus, because lazy programmers were like, I ain't got time to write down the variable twice, so let me just write I plus plus. That would be fine. That means I increases by 1. I had a student once write I equals I plus plus. That actually doesn't work. I doesn't change if you do that. It's a long story why that is. So don't do that. Choose one or the other. Don't like make a hybrid model of the two. Weirdly enough, I equals I plus plus I does work, but oh my gosh, we're getting a little too crazy. So I'm just going to leave it at I equals I plus 1. And then now my condition, I can think about my condition. I'm starting at 0. I'm going up by 1. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And I want mine to end at 10, so I could say, well, I don't actually want 10, right? There's no file name called frame underscore 10. So I want to end before I get to 10, so I could write that. You could change your number to be whatever number yours is, or we could all have the same code and all be correct if we wrote number of frames. Because number of frames is true for whatever your code is. And I think that's probably the best answer right there. On the quiz, though, you'll actually type in a number because I want to see if you understand like what the number is supposed to be based on the pattern. But for us, since we've sort of just written that number down in a variable, now we can just write that down and just use that anytime we want to write a while loop for this particular array. Oops, sorry, I just deleted something. Okay, great. So now we have this loop that's counting from 0 to 1 less than number of frames, going up by 1 each time. So now we can take that's the actual nuts and bolts of the loop. Now, what is it that we're actually trying to repeat? Well, it's the loading of the image, right? So we can take that loading line of code, this line right here, and we can copy and paste it into the loop, and then replace the page number and the file name like spot with I instead of 0 or 1 or 2 or whatever. And that way we can change that as we go. So watch this. I'm going to copy and paste it, but there's some very specific things we got to change. So I'm going to copy. And actually, I'm going to delete all these right now so I don't forget. Just going to delete them as well. So this is my whole setup right now. That's everything in my setup. And then I'll paste it in. And so you might already know, but in case you don't, like here's where we need to change things to I. That's no longer going to be page 0, or we're just loading the same, we're loading different pictures. Actually, in this case, we'll load the same picture to the same page over and over again, and the rest of our pages will be blank. So I'm going to place the I inside of here, inside of this page number aspect of our array, and that way this I equals I plus 1 now functions as I flipping to the next page, so to speak, which is really fantastic. We've automated that process. But now this is technically loading an image into each page, but we're always loading the same image. We're just loading the first frame into every single page. So now I want to put my I in here, but how do you do that, right? If I put I there, it'll look for that exact file name with the letter I there, and that's not what we want. We want to substitute the number value, not the letter I. So here's how you do that. You can splice this is called a string, by the way, any kind of like pure text that's a value for something like a file name is called a string. I can end the string here, so that could be a piece of the string, and I can start a new string over here, and then see how I becomes like a variable again. It's not like text. And then this isn't quite done because it's probably underlining on yours. So the way you can like stitch all these together is with the plus sign. It's called the concatenation operator, but it's really just like gluing these two strings together with an I in the middle. But if it's outside of the quotes, instead of it being the letter I, it will be the value that I contains. So the first time through the loop, it'll look for frame underscore 0 underscore delay, blah, blah, blah. And then this next time through the loop, it'll be frame underscore 1 because our number is changing. And when we include it into a string this way, it's going to include the value and not the letter. Whereas if we did it this way, it would include the letter, not the value. Does that make sense, folks? So by putting it out of the double quotes, we're saying this is not a string, it's a variable, but we'd like to insert the value of that variable inside of this string. And the plus sign is just like stitching it together. It's like I have this piece, and I have this piece, and I want to glue it together with this piece. So there's like 3 different pieces that all get kind of glued together with those plus signs. Hey, guess what? We just did that in AP Computer Science. This is like an actual topic in AP Computer Science. We were concatenating strings. And I've mentioned in the past, like, one of my secret objectives is to like give you experience with all sorts of things that'll be in the AP curriculum So although strings aren't necessarily in programming 10 curriculum, they're pretty useful. Like, you couldn't really do a lot of stuff without them. And we're getting a little exposure to some of the more advanced topics as well. So it's kind of fun to see that. And by the time, if you choose to do AP Computer Science, you've already gotten, a bunch of the curriculum already under your belt. You already know a bunch of it. So that's going to be great. Anyways, blah, blah, blah. We have successfully, I'll run it just to confirm, but we won't see a GIF happening or anything. And I actually have an error. It says frame underscore 9 delay blah 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 is missing or inaccessible. So this might happen to you as well when you run it. You might get one particular one that is off, and I think I know why for mine. I'll zoom out here, go in, and oh yeah, check it out. I botched my name. It says copy, so I guess I just screwed up. So I'll put mine back. But there is possible you could have other problems. So your GIF, for example, see how it says delay 0.06s? So for you, some of yours might have, some of the pictures might have longer delays, and they're designed to make like the GIF pause on certain images or take longer on certain images. So you might have to go and like scrub those file names too to make that all consistent. Most of them are the same. Like most of them, that won't be a problem, but there'll be the occasional GIF where like it won't load that particular file. So just make sure that it's the same as the others. Like this one, I've seen where it says like maybe this one will be 0.1s instead of 0.06. So you might need to go and just double check. And again, if you have 100 images, that's kind of a pain. But if you just assume they're all right and then run it, the ones that are wrong will stand out. Like it'll show you in red, just like mine did. So you can go and find those pretty quick. Okay, so we have no image. Like it runs and it's loaded it. So I'm gonna pause this video, and then I'm gonna do a third video so you can come back and check out how you actually make it show up on the screen. So here we go. I'm gonna stop now. Bye.